Hello again. This is the third podcast which looks at the political spectrum of the turn of the century, giving you the sort of the underlying knowledge, the essential underlying political knowledge that you need for this unit of the course. So again, if you can make sure you've got the handout in front of you as we go through it. What we're doing here is we're focusing in on the middle part of the spectrum today. Okay, so it's the sort of centre or liberal aspect of the political spectrum. Okay, so let's revisit the social pyramid again that we've looked at in the previous two podcasts. Remember, the social pyramid represents effectively power, and as you can see, the the large social groups sit at the bottom of the political social spectrum, because they lack power, whereas the smaller groups, and as you move up the pyramid, you're moving through the middle classes and then to the upper classes. That the higher up you go, effectively, the more power they have. And remember, we said always try to define power in terms of economic power, control of wealth, and political power, control of government, and effectively governmental power. So when you're writing an essays, don't just talk about power. Be very precise about which you're talking about, because they're obviously very different. So we're focusing here on the middle part of the pyramid. Okay, and it's just a reminder that on the right-hand side we've got the political parties that represent the different social groups in the German Reichstag, because we're going to be moving into that in the next topic. So we started off in the first podcast by looking at the lower part of the social pyramid, in particular the urban classes, and they were represented in the Reichstag by the Social Democratic Party, or the SPD, Social Partei Demokratisch, SPD. They were a relatively small party when they were first formed in the 1870s, but by 1912, 2 years before the outbreak of World War I, they were actually the largest political party in the Reichstag, which reflected the fact that the urban working classes were the biggest, they were the fastest and the fastest growing social class in Germany. At the top, we have the elites. We've got the old elites, the Junkers, and then we've got the new industrial elites. Okay, so the sort of higher classes. The word elite refers to at the top, and they were represented in the Reichstag by the Conservative Party and by the National Liberals. So again, we'll look at that more in subsequent lessons. Okay, but we're focusing here on the middle part of the pyramid, which is very much sort of like the middle classes. Okay, now the middle classes in the Reichstag, on the whole, they're more difficult to define, but we've got sort of two major groups. We've got the white-collar workers, who are the sort of professional, managerial class. We've done a lesson on them, and we will do more lessons on them. And then we've got the Mittelstand, who are kind of like a lower middle class, small artisans, craft workers, small shopkeepers, etc. Okay, and in the Reichstag, they were very much represented by the left liberals. Okay, now there are more political parties that we will talk about, but it is really important that you know the names of those political parties, and even more importantly, as you go through the course, that you learn by heart the key election results. How many seats in the Reichstag did each party have in each election? And you do need to learn those, and you need to be able to talk about those in an informed way. That's really important, and that just purely takes legwork, hard work. It's constantly revisiting, making flashcards, putting those figures on your wall, etc. Now, there's one other political party that's not represented here, that's not shown on the social pyramid, but I do want to mention it. Okay, and that is the Catholic Centre Party, and the name Centre, the Centre Party. It was often called the Catholic Centre Party, and in German the word centre is Zentrum. So you often see the initials, the ZP. Now, as the name suggests, that was a centre party. It was a party in the centre, in the middle of the political spectrum. So therefore the values of the Centre Party were very liberal values. More on that word liberal in a minute. Okay, why is it not actually shown on this diagram? Well, the reason for this is because on this diagram the parties are linked to the social pyramid. Okay, so on the whole, social parties tended to get their votes from one particular social class. So the SPD got their vote from the urban working classes. The left liberals tended to get their votes from the white collar workers and to some extent the Mittelstand. The National Liberals tended to get their votes from the industrial elites, and the Conservative Party tended to get their votes from the Junker part, from the Junkers, from the landed nobility. The thing about the Centre Party is they were, as I said, they were a Catholic group, so their ideology was based around a religion. Okay, and there were Catholics dotted in all aspects of the political spectrum. So there were Catholics in the lower classes. There were Catholics who were Mittelstand. There were Catholics who were white collar workers. There were Catholics who were industrial elites. Less so with the Junkers. Now the reason for that is the Junkers were primarily Protestant. Okay. And again, we'll develop this and look at this in a lot more detail. But the point I'm making, therefore, is that the Catholic Centre Party tended to get their support from all aspects of the political pyramid, from the social pyramid. So they were a different party because for that particular reason. So when we're talking about liberal policies, we're talking about the left liberals in particular, to some extent the national liberals. They were, the national liberals who represented the industrial elites were more right-wing, we would often call centre right-wing. Okay, within the centre part of the political spectrum, some parties lay more towards the right, and some parties lay more towards the left. So that's why we talk about the National Liberals being a liberal party, a centre party who were more towards the right, whereas the left Liberals, they call themselves the left Liberals, were a centre party that were more on the left of the political spectrum. Let's move on. Okay, well there's the political spectrum, so you can get that sort of idea there. So there, of course, is our social pyramid turned upside down. Okay, well, not upside down, turned sideways on. So what we're talking about here, we're focusing in here on, in this podcast, on the middle part. Okay, now as we, just going back to the previous podcast, as we said, that the left wing, the socialists, were split. Okay, there were a radical or extreme left wing who later formed a political party called the Communist Party. And then there were the moderate left wing, who in Germany were the SPD, and they were, as we said earlier, a small party in 1875. But as the urban working classes grew, the SPD grew, and increasingly some members of the SPD splintered away and adopted more extreme left wing views. And that dashed line here represents the sort of division. And that's a key point, remember. We said that, I don't want to go back too much into previous podcasts, but we said that the thing about the socialists is they were split. They were not a united group, okay? Although they shared a common ideology, which was redistributing wealth, effectively there was disagreement about method, okay? But the moderate socialists believed in democracy. So the moderate socialists were central, okay, in the political spectrum. The moderate socialists had liberal values, okay? And liberal values basically means that you believe that it is important to listen and not to fight using violence. You believe that you bring about change through Parliament. Okay, now remember, Parliament is the elected representatives of the people. It is that large assembly. In Germany, it was called the Reichstag. Not the same as government. Government is very different, which is the sort of the small group of men and women who actually decide policy, whereas Parliament is the elected assembly. And liberal values, people with liberal views, believe that change should be brought about through sensible adult discussion within Parliament, okay, and that everybody should have their view, okay. So the SPD were not revolutionary, they were democratic in their values, and that's why they have got the word D, democracy, Social Partei Demokratisch, in the name of their party, okay. So when we're talking about the centre of the political spectrum, we are talking about left-wing groups. Likewise, on the right, we've talked about the nationalists. Likewise, nationalism covered a broad range of the political spectrum. Yes, there were extreme nationalists. In other words, they were like the communists. They were groups that believed it was important to bring about change outside parliamentary process using violence, okay, using revolution, okay, and that they believed power should be based in the hands of a few without any involvement of parliaments at all. Whereas there were, of course, many moderate nationalists, conservatives, who believed in democracy, okay. So an example of that would be the National Liberals, okay, that we said earlier. They represented the elites, okay. They were on the right of the political spectrum, but they did believe in Parliament. They did believe in parliamentary process to some extent, okay. Now, even the National Liberals were split, okay. So there were some National Liberals who were more right-wing than other National Liberals. There were different shades within all of these political parties. So it's really important for this particular element of the course that you really recognise that. Well, once you start talking in very simplistic general terms, without recognising those subtle shades, you're going to really start losing marks, okay? So you've got to be very, very precise and very clear in the way in which you write about this. That's an important thing, okay? So the centre that we're talking about today effectively is about the moderates of the two of the left and the moderates of the right. Let's move on. Okay, so same diagram, I've just highlighted that with a circle. That's what we're talking about, okay? And so within that group you've got left liberals, you've got the SPD, okay? So again, just jot that down. So you've got the left liberals, you've got the SPD, who kind of encompassed, because they grew and grew and grew, and some of the SPD gravitated more to the extreme left, but many of the SPD, particularly the older generation of SPD, were very much in the moderate. And then, of course, you've got the National Liberals and other groups, okay? And the key one is the centre. The centre will be really, really important all the way through this course. And they, remember, are slightly different because they drew support from all social classes, because their values were primarily about Catholicism, okay? And again, we'll develop that more in the course. Just to give you a sort of clue how important they were, the Centre Party. In 1933, the Enabling Act, which was the law that was passed through the German Reichstag that gave Hitler the power to rule by himself, well, that was pretty much passed by the Catholic Centre Party. Okay, obviously the Nazi Party voted for it, but they could not have passed it if the Catholic Centre Party had not voted with them. So that's how important the Catholic Centre Party will become, but they were always important. Okay, so just to bring it all together then, okay, on the final slides, who were they? Okay, we often call them Democrats, or it's not actually written there, but I would add, we often talk about liberals, okay, liberal values. Fundamentally, they believe that change must be brought about peacefully by elected political parties working through an elected National Assembly Parliament. And again, I keep emphasising that you must never ever get the word Parliament confused with government. Okay, we'll develop more in the lesson next week, but you need to be very, very clear. That's what I would call a rookie mistake, which you cannot afford to make it at A level. Okay, Parliament, remember, is a large group, usually about 500 or 600 representatives. Government is usually a much smaller group, or always a much smaller group, often only about 15 people. The German Parliament was called the Reichstag, and remember that although we have liberal political parties like the Left Liberals and the National Liberals and the Centre Party, the left wing and the right wing parties to some extent had liberal values as well. So the SPD, particularly the older generation of the SPD, were very liberal in their values, and some of the members of the National Liberals, particularly those on the left of the National Liberals, were very central in their values as well. Okay, so Democrats can be either left wing or right wing in their ideas, or we add to that there were some democratic parties like the Centre Party who don't quite fit in, but they were central in their ideas. But the key thing is democratic parties are moderate, not extremists, okay, because they sit there. The extremist parties were ideologically opposed, they were opposite, but what's interesting, of course, is they had something in common. They both disagreed with parliamentary process. So there was an element of agreement that the extremist parties agreed about method, but they disagreed about their aims, okay, what they wanted to achieve in the end. Whereas the central parties were very much in agreement. They disagreed about aims because some centre parties were left-wing, others were right-wing, so they had disagreements about what type of society they wanted to create, but they agreed about how to bring about change, which was through parliamentary process. Okay, so again, I've hopefully consolidated, I've revisited here some of the ideas from the previous podcasts to help just secure your understanding by revisiting. The more we revisit and repeat the same points, the more likely you're going to remember and understand those points. But I've obviously introduced some new ideas for you in this podcast today. So you've got these, obviously they're on YouTube, all three of them, that you can go back and replay them. You've got the handout, but constantly revisit. You've got these three podcasts, they are the language of the course, okay? So as we go through future lessons, you need, I will be talking about these words, I'll be using these words all the time, and I can't afford to have blank looks like I don't understand what that word means, okay? It has got to become second nature for you, and the only way for it to become second nature is to replay and reread the sheet until it is second nature for you. I cannot emphasise how crucial that is for this particular element. Okay, hopefully that was useful for you. I'll sign off now and see you again in the next lesson. Thank you.